Welcome to When We Talk Podcast, a place where honest conversation happens. We talk about life, relationships, marriage, being single. We even talk about faith. This episode is hosted by Kenneth Bonner, Reggie Smith, and Jacqueline Wells. Well, welcome again to the When We Talk Podcast. This is Kenneth Bonner,
Reggie Smith,
and Jackie Wells.
So today we want to talk about a topic request from Topic Tuesdays. The request is, how do you be selfless in a relationship? And what that basically means is not just in the relationship, but just in life in general. And what that basically means is, how do you not focus so much on yourself and include people in your realm of attention?
I think that's kind of hard to do, especially when you have the intentions to always be caring for other people. Sometimes it's hard to not be selfless depending on the situation. But oftentimes in relationships, it can become an issue, especially when you have so many things going on. You know, I know for me personally, there's been situations and times in my marriage where I had school going on, work going on. And, you know, I would come home so physically drained from everything that I had going on that I didn't really consider the feelings of my husband or of my children. So not that I was intentionally trying to not be selfless, but I think sometimes we just get so caught up in the day-to-day activities that we have going on that we forget to be considerate of others.
I think that throughout the course of the day, just your everyday, you spend so much time working, pouring out into everyone else. You also miss pouring into yourself or having someone pour into you to fill you back up, so that by the time you get home, you're drained. You know, everything about you is pretty much gone, especially depending on what type of job that you have. Now, if you're a millionaire, you run your own company, even running your own company takes a lot of time away. But the type of jobs that we have, where you're constantly dealing with people all day long, you tend to miss and lose focus of the other things that are more important, such as spouse, such as children, such as responsibilities. And I think even more important, you also lose sight of yourself, which is also more important. So after the rigmaroles of the day has passed, you're still trying to find yourself and regroup and get back to the you. And then by that time that happens, now you have to get home, depending on how long your trip is or whatever. Now you have to become part of everyone else's routine and day. And that does get hard.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with both of you. One of the things that I like to do when I get off work is I like to have my drive home from work, you know, come in the house, of course, greet my family, you know, give the attention that I need to give. But I also like to kind of go to my own place or space and just kind of withdraw a little bit. And what that does for me is it allows me the time I need to kind of release everything that I went through during my day, so that I could be what I need to be to my family. But at the same time, sometimes I can get caught up and lost in that space for too long, to the point to where I may end up neglecting, you know, my wife, my kids, because I got work, I got school, you know, I got other things to focus on. And even though that's not the intent, it can happen. So I definitely understand the importance of trying to be selfless.
I want to go ahead and pose a question out to you guys. Why do you think it's easier to be selfish than it is to be selfless?
I don't think that a lot of people purposely try to be selfish, although there are some that do. But you know, just by nature, we were born individuals.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we were born by ourselves, you know, and like they always say, you came in by yourself, you're going to die by yourself. Even if you came in with a twin, you're still by yourself. So I think it's a tendency to always look out for ourselves all the time, to try to make, especially when you get older, you try to make sure that you're taking care of yourself spiritually, mentally, physically, and everything. And while you're trying to do that, you tend to lose focus. But we're individuals. At the end of the day, we are individuals. Yeah, I get the, you know, being with a spouse, blending in, becoming one. But while you're still becoming one or as one, you are still an individual at the end of the day. So I think it's natural for us to tend to look out for ourselves. But sometimes as we're looking out for ourselves, we spend too much time in that. And then we miss the aspect of maybe that spouse or the children or those other things that are important.
To piggyback off of what you said, I agree with you wholeheartedly, but I also think that there's a flip side to that. The side about what about those people who have been independent for so long, and have taken care of themselves. They do everything by themselves. They haven't depended on the fact that they need to give themselves to somebody else. But maybe it was they've been in a relationship for so long, they haven't dated in a while, or whatever the case. Those people might be more so on the side of being selfish because they haven't adapted to being in a relationship with somebody and having that need to give them the attention, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's great.
So I'm going to be devil's advocate right now, coming from the perspective of people who are intentionally selfish. Because, you have those relationships. It could be on vice versa, woman or male, where it's my way or the highway, where they're so caught up in their motive. They're so caught up in the things that they want, that they need, that they totally they totally forget about the other person. So I'm talking from a selfish perspective of a person who is totally not considerate of other people, but always wanting to put their needs first. And, in relationships, let's just be honest, that happens. It happens a lot. But why is it easier for a person to be that way than for them to look in the mirror and say, you know what, I think I have an opportunity to where I can be selfless versus being selfish?
So if I could chime in and say something, here's my perspective on that. If you're a person that it's only about you, only your way or the highway, then you have no business being in a relationship.
Got you.
That, and I strongly believe that. But those that are in relationships and are like, it's all about me, it's my way or the highway or whatever the case, then I have to ask, why are you so controlling? Why do you have to control every circumstance? Are there insecurities present? Is there a need for you to have things go your way? Are you that inconsiderate that you disregard other people's feelings? And that's the question that I would ask. What's the reason? There has to be an underlying issue. You're not just going to be that straight out selfish for no reason.
Well, I think that sometimes when you've been doing something for so long, it becomes a habit. Right? It just flat out becomes a habit. And I don't think the fact is that some maybe are so caught up in what they've been doing for 15, 20, 30 years that they might not know. And even if you tell them they've been stuck in that me mode for so long, it takes a minute for them to look in the mirror, gather all the data together to really realize, okay, I have been a little selfish or a lot selfish, but it's some things are habits. Even now to this day, as old as we are, even in relationship, we still have certain habits that we have acquired and we have taken on with us long before we met our spouses. And sometimes it takes sitting down and discussing those things, and sometimes a lot of discussions, because habits don't break overnight, just like habits don't occur overnight. It takes time to develop those habits. So if you're patient, then there's something that needs to be discussed. But if you realize during the onset of the relationship, depending on how long you all are dating, that this is one of those habits that could be a detriment in a relationship, then you need to stop and pause and take a look in the mirror and be like, is this something that I'm willing to handle? Because this right here, you can pretty much look at some things that are habits and be like, something, this might not take a break within 6 months or a year's time. This might be a 5-10 year thing, depending on the trauma that's been caused with it, that's come along with it. And that's not always easy.
Okay. So I'm not playing devil's advocate, but what about those people that are in relationships and you feel like you give and give and give, and the person that you're in a relationship with is not giving anything back? Do you think that that's a cause of being selfish as well?
Yes. Definitely. I think it's a cause of being selfish because you're not being considerate of that other person. Ultimately, that's what it boils down to. Being selfless to me is give and take. You can't just always focus on always giving of yourself and not having someone else pour back into you. Because again, like Reggie said earlier, it can become draining.
Right.
And let's think about ministry. We are always putting the needs of other people before our own. So at times we do feel like we need to have those times where we have time to ourselves, where we, feel like we need time to regroup and get ourselves back on track because we spent so much time pouring into others. But anytime you have a situation to where a person is not considering you and they think that it's all about them, then it's a problem. And to me, it will never work in a relationship. It has to be a balance, and there has to be give and take.
I completely agree with that.
So to add to what Kenneth was saying, so what happens when you tell your spouse that you feel that I'm giving, and you're doing more of the taking, and your giving it's not reciprocated. Okay, now you've been in this relationship about 5 years, all right, and even though the dynamics of the relationship are good, but this one aspect continues to be an issue, and now you're vested. You guys have kids. You guys have built houses. You guys have done all these different things over the last 5 years. And now you approach this person because now it's like, okay, I'm tired and there needs to be a change. And that person still refuses to reciprocate. What do you do then? How do you navigate through that?
That would definitely be a challenge for me.
Wow. All I can say is really to communicate, or maybe seek counseling. I think that would be a good opportunity, that if the communication between you or your spouse or you and your significant other is not taking the route to where there is resolve, sometimes it takes bringing a third party, a professional person who can give proper insight to the situation, to see things from the outside looking in. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of times, when you're together with your spouse or your significant other and you're trying to express how you feel, they may not see things from your perspective, especially if it's their norm, if they continue to act or not fulfill those needs that you're expressing to them. So I think that, maybe going to a counselor and bringing somebody in that can professionally guide you and bring you to the resolve that you need to conquer that issue.
I would agree with the counseling aspect of it. And the reason I say that is because a mediator can kind of get you to see outside of yourself, outside of your own perspective. And then with a mediator, a third party, they can shed some light on your perspective as well as your partner's perspective. So now you don't just have the narrow view or the tunnel vision to say, well, you know what, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm doing nothing wrong. Now you have somebody from the outside looking in that can give you some keen insight into your situation.
Okay, so let me play that advocate as I always do. So in our culture, we don't believe in counseling. You understand? We come from the age-old antics of whatever happens in this house stays in the house. We're not more apt to go to counseling like other cultures are. You understand? We have our issues. We have our reasons why we don't. So you have your spouse that's like, okay, I understand it, but I don't want to go to counseling. How can we work this out another way? What would be another alternative? Because everyone's not apt, like I said, in our culture, everyone's not apt to just be like, oh, I'm about to call a therapist or a counselor and let's go on Saturday. No, that's not going to work. So what would be the other alternative, and not having a mediator? What do you do?
That's between you and your spouse ultimately. I mean, because if you have someone that is intentionally not wanting to give of themselves to meet your need, then I have a concern with that. Because when you love somebody and when you're in a relationship with somebody, like I said, it's not just about you. It should never always be one-sided. And if you're coming to me multiple times telling me, the things that you want to see changed or issues that I'm doing or things that's coming up, and I'm just not willing to, to submit to those things and actually be the one to say, okay, babe, let me work on this, then I think that is a problem. And you really have to really pray about it. You know what I'm saying? I'm the first person to go into my closet and seek the Lord about some different challenges that I have. But I always look at myself first to see how I can change. You know what I'm saying? I never look at my husband to see, okay, or point the finger, you doing this, you doing that. But what can I do in myself to try to better the situation? But ultimately, I think that, if the other person is not willing to work things out, especially if they love you and it's a concern for you, then you have to think about that. That can be challenging.
I agree. I think that if you're in a relationship and you're not willing to seek help, then what is your real purpose of dragging this person through the mud or taking them through the ringer and ignoring their needs? That relationship is doomed to fail. There is no possible way a relationship can survive if we don't have people that can ultimately communicate and seek the help that they need. I agree with you. You have to pray. You really have to pray and seek God to find out next steps. But it will come to a point to where you're tired of communicating the same thing over and over. At some point, this person has to get it. What if they don't get it? Then what do you do?
But what
if
that's what he's asking. Well, let me ask this then. So could it be? I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head that they're withholding from you because you withheld from them with some things in the past or in the course of the relationship, and now they're just at that place where, I'm just not gonna do because I can remember back then when he didn't or she didn't do what I asked, and they just have that, you know what I'm saying? They just have that carrying over their head to whereas, okay, well, I'm gonna be stubborn at this point. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm just trying to understand, why wouldn't a person want to make their spouse or their significant other happy if they're bringing a genuine concern to them? Why wouldn't they want to do that?
The only thing I can say is that maybe they're done with the relationship. If you're not willing to go get help, or and I get it. Some people get angry and upset, and they say what they say, or they do certain things out of anger. But at the end of the day, what is our end goal here? What are we trying to accomplish? Are we really trying to resolve an issue, or are you just that stuck in your pride that you won't humble yourself to come to the table and talk?
I think it's pride. I think it's hurt. I also think that it's immaturity.
Yeah.
And all of those things can breed various different types of cancer in a relationship. It can force you to become selfish, and you put up walls, you build up barriers or whatever. And some of that could be from past hurts, past traumas or whatever, or the inability, for some species to never let go of things, to always hold on to things.
So let me ask you a question, sir. What do you mean by some species? Can you clarify, please?
There are some species that were created after man that have a tendency to hold on to things. 2019, you're still holding on to something from 2013 or 2011 or whatever. It doesn't matter. And we have declared that we are going to move forward. But yet, every single time, somewhere down the line, something pops up and creates even more fire in the original argument that has nothing to do with it.
That's exactly how men is, and I understand that, man. That's
right. But usually, sometimes that species that was created after man, I think somewhere in Genesis 2, never let go. And that prevents a lot of things from actually going forward, or you become selfish in some things because the first thing is to always, I'm going to protect my heart, and I understand that we all have to protect our heart at some given point in time, or always, depending on the job that you do or whatever it is that you're doing. But you can't always protect your heart because you haven't let go of things in the past that may have been perpetrated by your own spouse. That's just certain species. I don't know if that's lions, tigers, bears. I don't know. I don't know.
Oh my!
Whoever was created after man.
Yeah. I hear you on that. So my thing and my question to you is this: how do you? If you say you forgive somebody, do you really forgive them if you're throwing things in their face that you said you forgave them for? And this question is directed towards that species that was created after the man.
Okay, so I guess I'm up.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Jackie.
Sure.
Yeah, we're listening.
Okay. Honestly, I think that that obviously there's some things that wasn't spoken out of honesty. if you're still holding on to something that happened years and years ago. There was actually no real resolve at the point to where you started communicating whatever that issue is or whatever that thing is. That means that it's either still happening or that it wasn't honestly addressed when it was brought to the table. Okay. And that's the reason why that person could be harboring unforgiveness or not wanting to move past it because it wasn't fully addressed the way that it should have been addressed. And ultimately, I think that that is a problem, especially if you are bringing up things from your past. How do you expect to continue to move forward if you're stuck in your past? That means that the relationship is going to stay stagnant and there's not going to be any room to move forward because you're still bringing up things that could hinder the relationship. So I just think that it's important to make sure that if it's something that really concerns you, if it's something that truly affects you, you have to be honest about the situation and address it head on.
And resolve it right there, so that you're not resolving it 5-10 years down the road.
Yes.
So in the next question, because I want to make sure we get this in, since this was a question, how do you be selfless in the relationship? How do you become selfless in a relationship? And I know we talked about a lot of things that may have addressed it, but can you let's shed some light on specifics that we can do to address the removing ourselves from being selfish to selfless in a relationship?
I think one is that always remember that when you're in a relationship, that it's not about you.
Right.
That it's not about you, and that you always have to remember that there is always someone that's tied to you. And so you always have to remember them. You always have to keep them in the forefront. And I got another example, like my wife, because my job, I'm so inundated in my job and my wife is inundated in hers. My wife says, hey, you know something? I just want to hear your voice one time out of the day, at least. Just call me. I just want to know that you're thinking about me. And I've had to kind of change how I do things. I get so caught up in my job, I forget to eat because I'm always doing this and that. And sometimes there are days that I do forget, and she'll let me know in her own way. But that I have to stop being so selfish, get caught up in everything else, and still remember her. So I think one of the keys is to always remember that there is someone else that's tied down to you, and that it's not about you. And that at the end of the day, really, it's always about someone else. It's never about you, because you'll get taken care of eventually, but you have to remember them in everything that you do. So my thing is that it's not that much for me to, hey, take 2 minutes or 3 minutes out of my day to call my wife, because that's what she wants. And that helps make her day. And I'm getting a lot better with it. So I try to make sure all the time I do that, to remember my wife, to remember those things that are important, and get back to my day.
And I think, too, it's so easy to be selfish that sometimes we forget to be selfless. And I agree with you 100% that focusing on the other person should always almost be a priority in a relationship. And I know that can kind of sound selfish to you, of being selfish to yourself, but I think ultimately you have to compromise. You have to learn how to compromise in the marriage or in the relationship, just to make sure that there's an equal balance between the two, because you don't want to give so much to where you're pouring out and nothing is being brought back to you. But again, you want to make sure that you understand the needs, the wants, and the interests of the other person. You want to make sure that you take the time to identify what those needs are, and also make sure you are fulfilling those needs through the communication with your partner.
I would agree with both of you. And what I will also say is, first of all, acknowledge it. Acknowledge if you're not being selfless in a relationship. Again, like it was pointed out earlier, that we're naturally going to take care of our needs, definitely. And in that, we just don't want to miss taking care of those around us, those we have been given stewardship over, those who are in our realm of what we're supposed to be taking care of or handling in this season. And the next thing I would say is pay attention. It's just as simple as pay attention, because when you don't pay attention, you miss things. I could come home and, for instance, and I'm not comparing people to animals. Let's take my dogs, for instance. When I come home, they're looking at me. When I walk up to the house, they're right in the window. They're standing in the window until they know I get to that door. When I get to that door and I unlock the door and I walk in, they're ready to jump all over me because they haven't seen me all day. You know, they love me. They want some attention. So a couple of the days I just had really hard times at work, and it's just been long days and I'm so exhausted. So I came home and took my shoes off because I had a bunch of stuff in my head. I put it in the closet, and my shoes in the closet. And then I took my bag and sat my computer bag down. I went and sat my lunch bag down and unloaded the dishes. I said hi to my wife, obviously, you know, kissed my wife, but then just kept on ignoring the dogs. And, you know, I just sat my lunch bag down, put my dishes in the sink, and went in the room. And so I was just trying to, you know, just wind down a little bit. When I came out the room, my oldest dog, Angel, she was sitting right outside the door, just waiting and waiting and waiting for her attention. And when I went over there, I just rubbed her a little bit, and then she took off and went about her business. Mm-hmm. And it was more so of the fact that I didn't acknowledge her when I came in the house. So when you pay attention to small actions like that, not comparing dogs to people, but pay attention to your family, because things that you could have shit with your wife or your kids could have an attitude because you didn't acknowledge them. You didn't, you know, come home and say hi. You didn't say, how was your day? It could be as simple as that. So I would just say, again, pay attention, because when you don't pay attention, you miss things, and acknowledge it.
And can I also add real quick, one of my favorite scriptures is, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever should believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. Mm-hmm. So our creator had us in mind from the beginning, and we were created in his image, which means that he was selfless from the beginning. You know what I'm saying? So I think ultimately we all have it in us to be selfless. We all have it. We just have to make sure that we're doing those things to portray the selflessness that's already on the inside of us.
Right.
I do want to say this, to come back side of it, is that there are times in the relationship where you do have to be selfish, you know, because you do have to take care of yourself at the end of the day.
Yes.
You understand? You still have to look out for your own mental health, physical health, spiritual health, and everything. But there's a time and a place for that. You want to make sure that as you're trying to take care of your own needs, that you don't engulf yourself in the you, and then you forget about the we.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we lose the fact, because relationships are hard in itself. They're hard in nature. And sometimes we engulf ourselves so much in the relationship, we forget about us. Mm-hmm. And I tell everybody all the time, you have to still remember who you are as an individual, because you're still an individual, but there's a time and a place for that. Don't be at work all day for 8 hours, drive for another hour, then come home and go to the gym for 4 hours, and come home, you only got 5 minutes for your wife. That's not going to work. Mm-hmm. You have to find balance, like each of you all stated. There has to be some type of balance. Never forget who you're tied down to, who you're married to. Don't forget your spouse and your children, but always still try to make time for yourself. Even if your time is 5, 10, 15 minutes, find that time for yourself to recharge, because at the end of the day, we still have a job to do and people that are depending on us.
Right. And I stress the importance of what you just said, Reggie, because if I don't recharge, if I don't have that time to, again, release all of my day, then how could I be who I need to be to my family? How can I be selfless if I don't take a few moments just to regain who I am or who I need to be in that moment? And I do think that that's really important, because like you said, we all pour out to people daily. We pour out so much. And even though sometimes we need people to pour back into us, you can never forsake or neglect the people that are close to you, you know, that need that attention from you.
I agree with everything you guys just said. That's my closing statement. I mean, I think we've touched on it all. So I'm speechless. I'm being selfless.
That's a great way to close out the show. You got any last thoughts, Reggie? You know?
No, I have none. That was my last closing thoughts and arguments.
Wow, I cannot believe we're being so selfless that we don't have any closing statements. Well, I guess we could say thank you again for tuning in. Thank you for your support. For everybody that listens, please like, share. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, pretty much all over the place. We're also on YouTube. You can actually go to YouTube and check out some of the videos from the recordings we did. And that's basically it. So until next time, keep your head up.
Keep God first.
And keep it moving.